The heat came early that year, rolling across the Texas plains like a fever that wouldn't break. By June, the ground was already cracked and thirsting, and Marcus Whitman was feeling every one of his 43 years as he posted another notice on the weathered board outside Caldwell's saloon. The paper was yellowed before he even tacked it up, but the words were clear enough. Help wanted, ranch hand, hard work, fair wage, no questions asked. Marcus didn't expect much. Good help was scarce when the cattle drives pulled most able-bodied men north for better pay and adventure. What was left were the drifters, the broken ones, or folks with nowhere else to turn. He'd been running his spread alone since his brother died the previous autumn, trampled by a spooked Mustang during a thunderstorm. The ranch wasn't much. A few hundred head of cattle, some horses, land that stretched wide but wasn't rich. But it was his, carved out of nothing by his father's stubborn hands and his own bleeding knuckles. People in town knew Marcus as a fair man, if quiet. He'd never married, never seemed to want much beyond the work and the land. Some said he was too particular. Others figured he was just waiting for the right woman to come along. The truth was simpler and sadder. He'd loved once, a schoolteacher named Sarah who died of consumption before they could marry. That was 15 years back, but the loneliness had settled into his bones, like winter cold that never fully thawed. 3 days passed without a single soul inquiring about the job. The heat pressed down harder each afternoon, making the cattle sluggish and turning the creek to mud. Marcus was beginning to think he'd have to ride into the next county to find help when she appeared. It was late afternoon, the sun hanging low and angry in the sky, when he spotted the figure walking up the dusty road. At first he thought it was a boy, slight build, clothes too big, hat pulled low. But as the figure drew closer, he could see the curve of hips beneath the oversized shirt, the careful way she moved like someone who'd learned to make herself small. She stopped at the gate, one hand resting on the weathered wood. Her face was sun-darkened, sharp-boned, with eyes the color of creek water after a storm. She couldn't have been more than 25, but there was something old in her gaze, something that had seen too much and learned not to trust easy. "You the one looking for help?" she asked. Her voice was steady but soft, like she wasn't used to speaking loud. "Depends," Marcus replied, walking closer. "You looking for work?" She nodded once. "Name's Elena Vasquez. I can ride, rope, brand, work cattle. Been doing it most my life." Marcus studied her. She was small, barely came up to his shoulder, but her hands were calloused and her stance was solid. More importantly, there was something in her eyes that spoke of desperation held in check. The look of someone who needed this job more than she was willing to say. "You run from something?" he asked, not unkindly. She didn't flinch. "Everyone's running from something out here. Question is whether you can do the work. Fair enough. You got a horse? Walking? Belongings?" She lifted a canvas bag from her shoulder. Everything she owned, apparently, fit in something smaller than a feed sack. Marcus felt a familiar tug in his chest, the same one he'd felt years ago watching wounded animals struggle to survive. "Work starts at dawn," he said finally. "Bunkhouse is behind the barn. Meals or whatever you can rustle up. Pays $20 a month." For the first time, something shifted in her face. Not quite relief, but close. "Thank you." She turned toward the barn, but Marcus called after her. "Elena." She paused. "Whatever you're running from, it better not follow you here." "It won't," she said, and the certainty in her voice made him believe her. That first night, Marcus lay in his bed listening to the sounds of someone settling into the bunkhouse. Soft footsteps, the creak of old wood, the kind of careful movements people made when they weren't sure they were safe yet. He wondered what her story was, where she'd come from, why she was alone on the road with nothing but the clothes on her back. But he'd meant what he said about no questions. Everyone deserved a chance to start over, especially out here where the past could get buried under dust and distance. Dawn came early, and brutal, the sun already fierce by the time Marcus stepped outside. He expected to have to wake Elena, maybe explain the routine. Instead, he found her by the corral, watching the horses with the kind of attention that came from real understanding. She'd changed into work clothes, still too big, but practical. Her dark hair was braided back tight, and in the morning light, he could see a thin scar along her jaw, old but deliberate. "Which one's the trouble?" she asked without looking at him. Marcus followed her gaze to the Mustang in the far corner, a steel-gray stallion with wild eyes and scars along his flanks. "That's Diablo. Haven't been able to break him. Keep meaning to sell him off." "He's not mean," Elena said quietly. "Just scared." Something in her voice made Marcus look at her closer. "You think you can handle him?" "Maybe." But not today. Trust takes time. They worked through the morning, checking fence lines and moving cattle to higher ground near the creek. Elena proved herself quickly. She rode like she was born to it, had a gentle hand with the cattle, and never complained about the heat that had Marcus sweating through his shirt before noon. She was quiet, focused, efficient. No wasted motion, no unnecessary chatter. It was like working alongside a ghost, if ghosts could rope steers and mend barbed wire. At midday they rested in the shade of a stand of cottonwoods. Marcus had brought water and hardtack, simple fare. Elena ate sparingly, like someone who wasn't sure when the next meal would come. Her hands, he noticed, had fresh calluses layered over old ones. This wasn't her first ranch job. "You been cowboying long?" he asked. She chewed slowly before answering. "Since I was 12. My father had a small spread down in Nuevo Leon. Lost it in a drought." "Family?" Her face closed off. "Not anymore." The finality in her voice warned him not to press. They finished their meal in silence, then returned to work. The afternoon heat was merciless, turning the air thick and shimmery. By evening, both of them were exhausted, dust-covered, and aching. Elena helped with the evening chores without being asked, moving through the routine like she'd done it 100 times before. That night, Marcus cooked beans and cornbread, enough for 2. He set a plate on the bunkhouse steps and knocked once. When Elena opened the door, she looked surprised. "You don't have to," she started. "Everyone eats," Marcus said simply. "Besides, I made too much." She took the plate with careful hands. "Thank you." As the days passed, they fell into a rhythm. Work from dawn to dusk, simple meals shared in comfortable silence, evenings spent on their respective porches watching the sun die behind the hills. Elena proved invaluable. She had an eye for sick cattle, could mend tack like a professional, and somehow managed to calm even the most skittish horses. But she remained guarded, careful, like someone who'd learned that letting people too close was dangerous. Marcus found himself watching her more than he should. The way she moved with unconscious grace, the rare smile that transformed her whole face, the gentle murmur of Spanish words when she thought no one was listening. There was beauty there, carefully hidden, like wildflowers growing in the shadow of rocks. It was during the second week that Marcus began to understand why Elena had come to him on foot, with nothing but a canvas bag. He'd ridden into town for supplies and stopped by the sheriff's office to check on any news about cattle rustlers. Sheriff Hawkins, an old friend, poured coffee and settled back in his chair. "Strange thing," Hawkins said casually. "Had a man through here a few days back looking for a Mexican girl. Said she stole from him down Laredo way. Offered a reward." Marcus kept his voice level. "That so?" "Yep, mean-looking son of a bitch. Diego Morales called himself. Said the girl was his property, ran off with things that didn't belong to her." Hawkins studied Marcus over his coffee cup. "Course, I told him I hadn't seen hide nor hair of any Mexican girls. Seemed the Christian thing to do. Appreciate that, Tom." "Marcus!" The sheriff's voice was serious now. "If this girl is at your place, and I ain't saying she is, you be careful." Morales had the look of a man who doesn't let go easy. That evening Marcus found Elena by the corral, working with Diablo, The Mustang had allowed her close enough to touch his neck, a miracle in itself. She was speaking to him in Spanish, low and soothing. Her guard was down, and Marcus could see the person she might have been before whatever had happened to her. Elena. She turned, and the wariness was back instantly. Something wrong? We need to talk. They walked to the porch of the main house. Marcus poured 2 glasses of water from the pitcher, handed her one. She sat on the edge of the steps, tense as a coiled spring. There's a man looking for you, Marcus said without preamble. Diego Morales. Elena went very still. The glass trembled in her hands. What did you tell them? Nothing. But he's not giving up easy. For a long moment, Elena said nothing. Then slowly she began to speak. Diego Morales is my husband, was my husband. Her voice was flat, drained of emotion. I was 16 when my father arranged the marriage. Said it would be good for both families, that Diego had money and land. Marcus waited. At first he was kind, bought me dresses, jewelry, made me feel like a queen. But after the wedding, she touched the scar on her jaw unconsciously. He changed. Said a wife should be seen but not heard. Should never question, never argue, never think for herself. The water glass cracked under her grip. When I tried to leave the first time, he brought me back. Locked me in the house for a month. Said if I tried again, he'd kill my little brother. Her voice broke. So I stayed. 2 years of staying quiet, doing what he said, pretending I was grateful. Marcus felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. What changed? My brother died. Fever. And I realized Diego couldn't hurt him anymore. Elena looked up at Marcus, and her eyes were fierce. That night, I took some money. Money I'd earned selling eggs and vegetables before the marriage. Money that was mine by right. And I ran. He'll call it theft. I know. She stood pacing to the edge of the porch. I know what this means. I should go. I shouldn't have come here. Shouldn't have... You're not going anywhere. Elena stopped pacing, stared at him. Marcus, you don't understand. He has friends, connections. He'll bring the law, or worse. Then we'll face it. Marcus stood, his decision crystallizing. This is your home now if you want it. No one's taking you back to that. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know? Marcus was quiet for a long time, looking out at the land that had shaped him, the endless sky that had witnessed every joy and sorrow of his life. My father once told me that a man is measured not by what he takes, but by what he protects. You came here looking for work, for a chance. I aim to see you get it. Elena's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. I won't be a burden. You've been anything but. That night, Marcus moved his rifle to the front room and oiled every gun on the property. Elena helped without comment, her face set with quiet determination. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The confrontation came 3 days later, just as the sun reached its zenith and the heat shimmered off the ground like water. Marcus was working on a broken gate when he saw the riders approaching. 5 men on horseback, moving with purpose. Even at a distance, he could see the man leading them, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black hat and a silver-studded belt. Diego Morales. Elena saw them too. She was hanging laundry behind the house, but when she spotted the riders, she dropped the wet shirt she'd been holding and walked to where Marcus stood. Her face was pale but determined. You can still tell them you never saw me, she said quietly. No, Marcus replied. I can't. The riders drew close and stopped just outside the yard. Morales dismounted slowly, his eyes fixed on Elena. He was handsome in a cold way, with careful mustaches and clothes that spoke of money. But there was something reptilian in his smile. Elena, mi corazón, he called out in Spanish, then switched to English. You have led me on quite a chase. I'm not going back, Diego. His smile widened. Of course you are. You are my wife. You took my money. You will come home and face the consequences of your foolishness. Marcus stepped forward. The lady says she's not going. Morales looked at him for the first time, taking in the work clothes, the sun-weathered face, the rifle held casually but ready. And you are? Marcus Whitman. This is my land. Ah. Morales nodded as if this explained everything. You are the man who has been harboring my wife, helping a thief. Do you know this makes you an accomplice? I know it makes me a Christian. One of Morales's men, a thin, scarred man with pale eyes, spat in the dust. We ain't here to debate religion, Whitman. Give us the girl, and we'll be on our way. She's not property, Marcus said evenly. She's a human being with the right to choose her own path. She chose when she married me, Morales replied. Everything she is, everything she owns, belongs to me, including that money she stole. Elena stepped forward then, her chin raised. The money was mine. From work I did before we married, you know this. A wife's earnings belong to her husband. This is law. Whose law? Marcus asked. Because last I checked, we're in Texas, not Mexico. The scarred man's hand drifted toward his gun. You getting smart with us, mister? The air grew thick with tension. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment, the way it balanced on the edge of violence. He'd been in situations like this before, during the war, times when words could either save lives or start a slaughter. I'm stating facts, Marcus said calmly. Elena came here looking for honest work. She's been earning her keep fair and square. She's committed no crime. She is an adulteress, Morales said, his voice turning ugly. Living with a man not her husband. This is sin in the eyes of God and crime in the eyes of the law. She's living in the bunkhouse, Marcus replied. Earning wages same as any cowhand. Nothing improper about it. You think I am fool? Morales's careful English was slipping, anger bleeding through. You think I do not see the way you look at what is mine? Elena spoke then, her voice carrying across the yard clear and strong. I am not yours, Diego. I never was. You bought me from my father like a horse or a cow, but you never owned my heart. You never owned my soul. Morales's face went dark with rage. Puta, you forget yourself. Marcus had taken 2 steps forward before he even realized he was moving. That's enough. The scarred man drew his gun, but Marcus was ready. The rifle swung up, and suddenly everyone was armed, weapons pointed, fingers on triggers. Elena stood between them, small and brave and unbending. Stop, she said, her voice cutting through the moment like a blade. Enough blood has been spilled because of me. She looked at Morales, and when she spoke, her voice was steady as stone. You want to know why I ran? You want to know what you lost? She pushed up her sleeves, revealing old scars, faded but unmistakable. This is what you are. This is what you call love. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Around him, even Morales's men seemed uncomfortable. You were disobedient, Morales said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. A man has the right to discipline his wife. A man has the right to be decent, Marcus said. Looks like that's not something you're familiar with. I will not be lectured by some dirt farmer who steals other men's wives. Then don't. Marcus's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of finality. You came here to take something that doesn't belong to you. You can leave empty-handed, or you can try to take her by force. But I'm telling you now, she's under my protection. Anyone who wants to hurt her will have to go through me first. Morales studied him for a long moment, weighing odds, calculating risks. His men were good, Marcus could tell, but they were also outnumbered by the land itself, far from help, facing a man who knew every rock and tree on his own property. This is not over, Morales said finally, holstering his weapon. A wife belongs to her husband. This is God's law. God's law is love, Elena said quietly. something you know nothing about. Morales mounted his horse, his face twisted with fury and humiliation. We will be back, Elena. With papers, with law behind us. You cannot run forever. I'm not running anymore, she replied. After they rode away, Marcus and Elena stood in the dust and heat, watching until the riders disappeared over the horizon. The tension slowly bled out of the air, but Marcus could feel the change between them, the way the crisis had shifted something fundamental. They'll be back, Elena said. Maybe. Probably. You could have been killed. Marcus looked at her, this small, fierce woman who'd somehow become the center of his world without him noticing. So could you? It would have been my choice. Same here. That evening, they sat on the porch again, but closer this time. The night was soft and warm, full of cricket songs and the distant lowing of cattle. Elena had washed her hair, and it hung loose around her shoulders, catching starlight. "Tell me about your wife," she said suddenly. Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Sarah. She was a schoolteacher. Came out from Missouri to start a school in town. Smartest woman I ever met. Kind, too. Saw good in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. You loved her." "I did. She died before we could marry. Consumption." I held her hand at the end, promised I'd never forget her. Elena nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" She turned to face him. "You're afraid that caring about me means forgetting her. But love isn't like water in a bucket, Marcus. It doesn't run out when you pour some somewhere else." Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "When did you get so wise? Pain teaches things happiness never could." They sat in comfortable silence until Elena spoke again. "I need you to know something. About Diego. About why I really left." Marcus waited. "There was another woman. His mistress. He'd visit her openly, flaunt her in town. When I asked him about it, he said a wife was for producing children, but a mistress was for pleasure. He said if I was jealous, perhaps I should try harder to please him." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the old hurt underneath. "The night I left, I'd gone to see the doctor, to ask why I hadn't gotten pregnant yet." Marcus turned to look at her. "The doctor told me I was barren. Had been since I was a child, from a fever. Diego didn't know, and I couldn't bear to tell him. To see the disappointment, the anger, to know he'd cast me aside, or take another wife." She wiped at her eyes. "So I ran. Took what was mine and ran before he could discover the truth. Elena." Marcus's voice was gentle. "Children aren't the only thing that makes a woman valuable. I know that now. But then I felt broken." "You're not broken. You're the strongest person I know." She looked at him, and in the moonlight, Marcus could see everything she'd been holding back. The loneliness, the fear, the carefully guarded hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be loved for who she was instead of what she could provide. "Marcus," she whispered. He reached out, cupped her face in his work-rough hands. "I know you've been hurt. I know you have every reason not to trust. But I need you to know, what I feel for you has nothing to do with children or convenience or any other practical thing. It's just you." When they kissed, it was soft and careful. Two people who'd learned that gentleness was precious, that kindness could be its own kind of courage. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of peace. They worked side by side in the growing heat of summer, building something together, not just a ranch, but a life. Elena gentled Diablo completely, riding him bareback in the evenings with a joy Marcus had never seen in her before. She planted a kitchen garden behind the house, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil with the same patience she'd shown the horses. Marcus found himself watching her constantly, memorizing the way she moved, the sound of her laughter, the careful way she mended his shirts. She'd begun sleeping in the main house, not in his bed, not yet, but close enough that he could hear her breathing at night, steady and peaceful. They talked about everything and nothing. Her childhood in Mexico, his memories of the war, their dreams for the ranch. Elena wanted to raise horses, breed the wildness out of the Mustangs without breaking their spirit. Marcus wanted to expand the cattle operation, maybe build a proper barn. Simple dreams, but shared ones. But peace was fragile out here, especially when it was built on borrowed time. Sheriff Hawkins rode out on a Tuesday morning, his face grim. Marcus saw him coming and called Elena from the garden. They met him at the gate, standing close together. "Tom," Marcus said, "what brings you out?" "Nothing good, I'm afraid." Hawkins dismounted, removed his hat. "That husband of yours, Elena, he's been busy. Got papers from a judge in Laredo, says you're a thief and a runaway wife, got the territorial marshal involved." Elena went pale. "When?" "They'll be here tomorrow, maybe the next day, with a federal warrant." Marcus felt the world tilt. "On what grounds?" "Theft of marital property, abandonment of conjugal duties." Hawkins's voice was disgusted. "Legal mumbo-jumbo, but it'll hold up in court if they can get her back to Mexico." "Then we run," Elena said immediately. "Tonight." "Where?" Marcus asked. "How far can we get before they track us down?" "They've got the law on their side now." Elena began to pace, mind racing. "California. We could make it to California. Start over." "And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders?" Marcus shook his head. "That's not living, Elena. That's just another kind of prison." Sheriff Hawkins cleared his throat. There might be another way. They both turned to him. If she wasn't married to Morales, the warrant would be worthless. Can't steal from your husband if he's not your husband. Marcus frowned. "But they are married." "Are they?" Hawkins smiled slightly. "See, I've been doing some checking. Turns out Elena here was 16 when they married. In Texas, you can't enter into a legal marriage contract under 17 without parental consent." Elena's eyes widened. "My father signed papers. Mexican papers, which have no legal standing in Texas territory." Hawkins pulled out a folded document. "I took the liberty of checking the territorial marriage records. There's no legal record of Elena Vasquez marrying anyone." Marcus stared. "You mean—" "I mean, in the eyes of Texas law, she's never been married. Can't steal from a husband you don't have." Elena sank to her knees in the dust, overwhelmed. Marcus knelt beside her, pulled her into his arms. She was shaking, but not with fear this time, with relief so profound it was almost pain. "But the federal marshal won't know that," Hawkins continued. "Not unless someone explains it to him. Someone official." "Tom," Marcus said carefully, "what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that when the marshal gets here, he might be interested to learn that the supposed theft victim has no legal claim to the supposed thief. Might also be interested to learn that Elena Vasquez is now Elena Whitman, married just this morning by a properly ordained minister." Marcus felt his heart stop. "What?" Hawkins grinned. "Reverend Walsh is waiting in town. Soon as you two get there, you can be married proper and legal. By tomorrow, when the marshal arrives, Elena will be a married woman with every right to be here." Elena looked up at Marcus, tears streaming down her face. Do you want—" Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "Elena, I've been wanting to ask you to marry me since the day you calmed Diablo. I just didn't think I had the right." "Why?" "Because you deserved better than a man who'd already given his heart away once." "And now?" Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile Elena had seen from him. "Now I know that hearts are bigger than we think, that loving someone doesn't mean forgetting someone else. It just means there's more love in the world." Elena threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, yes, yes." They were married an hour later in the small church in town, with Sheriff Hawkins and his wife as witnesses. Elena wore a simple blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Hawkins, and Marcus wore his best shirt, the one Elena had mended so carefully. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when Marcus kissed his bride, it tasted like freedom. They spent their wedding night in the hotel in town, partly for tradition and partly for safety. The next morning they rode back to the ranch as husband and wife, ready to face whatever came. The federal marshal arrived just after noon, accompanied by Diego Morales and 2 of his men. Marshal Bradley was a professional, courteous but firm. He read the warrant aloud, explained the charges, and asked to speak with Elena Vasquez. "That would be Mrs. Elena Whitman," Marcus said, presenting their marriage certificate. Morales exploded. "This is impossible! She is my wife." Marshal Bradley examined the certificate carefully, then looked at Elena. "Ma'am, is this your signature?" "Yes, sir." "And you were free to marry Mr. Whitman? No prior legal obligations?" "None whatsoever, Marshal. I've never been legally married before yesterday." The marshal turned to Morales. "Sir, you'll need to provide proof of your marriage to this woman." Morales sputtered, produced the Mexican marriage certificate. The marshal examined it, then handed it back. "This document has no legal standing in United States territory. According to our laws, Mrs. Whitman was never married to you, and therefore could not have stolen marital property." "This is ridiculous," I demand. "What you demand doesn't matter," the marshal said calmly. "The warrant is invalid. Mrs. Whitman is free to go." Morales's face went purple with rage. "You cannot do this. She belongs to me. No one belongs to anyone else in this country, sir. I suggest you return to Mexico before I find cause to arrest you for harassment." After they left, Marcus and Elena stood in their yard, holding hands and watching the dust settle. The summer heat still pressed down, but it felt different now. Not oppressive, but warm, embracing. "Mrs. Whitman," Marcus said, trying out the name. "I like the sound of that," Elena replied. That night they lay in bed together as husband and wife, skin touching skin, hearts beating in rhythm. They made love with the desperate tenderness of people who'd almost lost everything, and afterward, they talked about the future. "I want to build something here," Elena said, her head on Marcus's chest. "Something that lasts." "We will. I want to raise horses and vegetables and maybe orphaned calves. I want to make this place alive." Marcus stroked her hair. "Whatever you want. I want children," she said quietly. "Not because we're supposed to have them, but because I want to give someone else the love I never had." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Elena, what the doctor said." "I know. But sometimes doctors are wrong. And even if they're not, there are other children who need love. Orphans, strays. We could make a family anyway." "We already have," Marcus said. "It's just us now, but it's family." Elena smiled in the darkness. "Yes, it is. The months that followed were the happiest of both their lives." Elena threw herself into ranch life with joy instead of desperation. She bred Diablo to a gentle mare, started a small herd of horses that carried both wildness and trust in their bloodlines. Her garden flourished in the impossible heat, providing fresh vegetables and flowers that made the ranch house feel like a real home. Marcus expanded the cattle operation, but carefully, sustainably. He hired 2 more hands, an old Mexican vaquero named Santos, who reminded Elena of her grandfather, and a young man named Billy, whose mother had died and who needed a place to belong. Elena mother-henned both of them, mending their clothes and feeding them like they were family. She never got pregnant, but she stopped seeing it as a failure. Instead, she poured her maternal instincts into the ranch, the horses, the strays that seemed to find their way to their door. She taught Billy to read, nursed Santos through a bout of pneumonia, and turned their home into a place where broken things could heal. Marcus watched his wife bloom like the desert after rain, and marveled at the way love could transform not just people, but entire landscapes. The ranch that had once been a place of solitude and hard work became something else, a sanctuary, a haven, a place where the lost could find their way home. On their first wedding anniversary, they held a celebration. The whole town came, even those who'd initially been suspicious of the Mexican woman who'd married Marcus Whitman so suddenly. But Elena had won them over with her quiet strength, her generous heart, her gentle way with both animals and people. As the sun set on their first year of marriage, Marcus and Elena stood on their porch, watching their friends and neighbors dance in the yard. Elena wore a new dress, white with blue flowers, that Marcus had ordered special from San Antonio. Her hair was braided with wildflowers from her garden. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. Elena considered this seriously. "Only that I didn't find you sooner. We found each other when we needed to. Do you think Diego will ever come back?" Marcus shook his head. "I heard he married his mistress." "Seems he's moved on to tormenting someone else." Elena felt a stab of pity for whoever that woman was, but pushed it aside. Diego was part of a past that no longer had any claim on her. "I love this life," she said suddenly. "Our life." Marcus pulled her close. "Even with all the hard parts? The heat, the drought, the worry about cattle prices? Especially with the hard parts. They're ours." As if summoned by their contentment, Billy ran up to them, breathless and grinning. "Mrs. Elena, Santos says there's a mare about to foal in the barn." Elena's eyes lit up. She'd been waiting for this birth for months, watching the mare carefully, preparing everything needed for a safe delivery. "Go," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "I'll finish here." Elena ran to the barn, her skirts flying, her heart full of anticipation. This was her element now, bringing new life into the world, nurturing growth, building futures from nothing but love and stubbornness. The foal was born just after midnight, a perfect filly with her father's wild spirit and her mother's gentle eyes. Elena helped guide her into the world, wiping her clean, making sure she was breathing strong. When the little horse tried to stand on shaky legs, Elena laughed out loud with pure joy. Marcus found her there an hour later, sitting in the straw beside the mare and foal, her dress stained and her hair falling out of its careful arrangement. She looked up at him with eyes that shone brighter than stars. "Look what we made," she whispered. Marcus sat beside her, put his arm around her shoulders. "She's beautiful. She's ours." They sat together in the warm barn, surrounded by the gentle sounds of horses and the sweet smell of hay, and Marcus thought about how completely his life had changed. A year ago, he'd been a lonely widower going through the motions of living. Now he was part of something larger, richer, more complex. He had a wife who challenged him, a ranch that thrived under her care, a future that stretched ahead full of possibility. "What should we name her?" Elena asked, watching the foal nuzzle against her mother. "What do you think?" Elena considered, her head tilted thoughtfully. "Hope." "She looks like hope to me." Marcus smiled. "Hope it is." As the summer deepened into its most brutal months, the ranch found its rhythm. The heat was relentless, turning the air into something thick and heavy that pressed against the skin like a living thing. But Elena had learned to work with it instead of against it. She rose before dawn to tend the animals, worked through the cooler morning hours, and rested during the worst heat of midday. In the evenings, when the sun finally released its grip on the land, she returned to her tasks with renewed energy. The little filly, Hope, grew strong and curious under Elena's watchful care. She followed Elena around the corral like a devoted puppy, nickering softly whenever her human mother appeared. Marcus often found Elena in the early morning hours, sitting cross-legged in the dirt while Hope napped with her head in Elena's lap. "You'll spoil her," he teased. "She deserves spoiling," Elena would reply, stroking the filly's neck. "She's perfect." And she was perfect, in the way that all new life was perfect, full of potential, unburdened by the weight of disappointment or fear. Elena saw herself in Hope sometimes, the person she might have been if she'd been allowed to grow up with love instead of fear. Santos proved to be a treasure. The old vaquero had worked ranches all his life, from Sonora to Montana, and his weathered hands could gentle the wildest horse or deliver the most difficult calf. He spoke little English, but Elena's Spanish was fluent, and the two of them developed an easy partnership built on mutual respect and shared knowledge. Billy was different, young, eager, full of questions and energy that sometimes wore thin in the brutal heat. But he was also gentle with the animals and respectful of Elena, in a way that reminded her there were good men in the world, men who understood that kindness was a strength, not a weakness. "Señora Elena," he said one afternoon as they moved cattle to a new pasture, "how'd you learn to read horses so good?" Elena considered the question, watching a young steer kick up dust in the distance. "My grandfather taught me. He said animals don't lie with their bodies the way people do. If you watch close enough, they'll tell you everything you need to know." "What's that mare telling you then?" Billy nodded toward a bay mare standing apart from the herd, head low. Elena studied the horse carefully. "She's herding. See how she's favoring her left front hoof? We need to check for stones or infection." They spent the next hour examining the mare, finding and removing a sharp piece of flint that had lodged between her shoe and hoof. The relief in the animal's eyes when the pain was gone reminded Elena why she loved this work. The immediate, honest reward of healing something that suffered. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of red and gold, Marcus brought up something that had been on his mind for weeks. "Elena, I've been thinking about expanding." She looked at him curiously. "The cattle operation?" "No, the house." Elena felt her heart skip. "Why?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "This place feels small sometimes. Not because it's too little for us, but because it feels like it's waiting for more." "More what?" "More people. More life. More—" He gestured helplessly. "I know what the doctor said, and I know we agreed that would be fine. But I keep thinking about all the children out there who need homes, orphans from the war, kids whose parents died of fever or accident. They need families, and we—" He looked at her hopefully. "We have love to spare." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. This was something she'd dreamed about but hadn't dared to voice, afraid it would seem like she was trying to replace something she couldn't have naturally. "You'd want that? Other people's children?" "They wouldn't be other people's children," Marcus said firmly. "They'd be ours. From the moment we took them in, they'd be ours completely." Elena reached for his hand. "There's an orphanage in San Antonio. Sister Mary Catherine runs it. I've heard she's always looking for good families." "You want to write to her?" Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. 2 weeks later, they received a reply. Sister Mary Catherine would be delighted to meet with them. She had several children who might benefit from life on a ranch, children who'd been in the orphanage too long, who needed space and sky, and the kind of healing that only came from hard work and unconditional love. The trip to San Antonio took 3 days through heat that shimmered off the ground like water. Elena had never been to the city, and the noise and crowds made her nervous at first. But Marcus held her hand as they walked through the streets, and gradually she began to see the beauty in the bustling life around them. The orphanage was a large stone building on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by gardens that the children tended. Sister Mary Catherine was a small, energetic woman with laugh lines around her eyes and dirt under her fingernails from working alongside her charges. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitman," she said warmly, "I'm so pleased you've come. We have many children who would thrive in a ranch environment." She led them through the orphanage, introducing them to various children. There was Maria, 12 years old, whose parents had died of cholera. She was responsible beyond her years, helping care for the younger children with patient tenderness. There was James, 10, whose father had been killed in a mining accident. He was quiet, serious, but Elena could see intelligence burning in his dark eyes. And there was little Anna, only 6, who'd been found wandering alone after an Apache raid killed her family. She spoke little, smiled rarely, but followed Elena with curious eyes. "We couldn't take all of them," Marcus said quietly to Elena as they stood in the garden. "No," Elena agreed, "but we could take some." They talked with Sister Mary Catherine about the children's histories, their needs, their personalities. Elena found herself drawn to Anna, recognizing something of her own childhood trauma in the little girl's careful silence. Marcus connected with James, who asked intelligent questions about cattle and horses and seemed hungry for a father figure. "What about Maria?" Elena asked. "She seems to take care of everyone." "Maria has been here longest," Sister Mary Catherine said sadly. "She's almost too old for adoption. Most families want younger children." Elena looked across the yard where Maria was braiding another girl's hair, her movements gentle and sure. "She needs a family too." "Elena," Marcus said carefully, 3 children at once. I know it's a lot, but look at her, Marcus. She's been everyone else's mother for years. Don't you think she deserves to be someone's daughter?" Marcus followed Elena's gaze and saw what she saw. A young girl who'd grown up too fast, who'd sacrificed her own childhood to care for others. His heart made the decision before his head could object. "All 3, he said to Sister Mary Catherine. "We'll take all 3. The nun's eyes filled with tears. "Are you certain?" "It's a tremendous responsibility." "We're certain," Elena said firmly. "They're meant to be with us." "I can feel it." The legal arrangements took 2 more days. Papers to sign, references to provide, promises to make about education and care and love. Finally, they were ready to return home with their instant family. The children were nervous during the long journey back to the ranch. Maria tried to be brave, but Elena could see the fear in her eyes, the worry that this new family might not want her once they got to know her. James asked countless questions about the ranch, the animals, what would be expected of him. Anna said nothing at all, just held tightly to a small cloth doll that had been her only possession when she was found. When they finally crested the hill that looked down on the ranch, Elena felt her heart swell with pride. This was home. This was where their children would grow up, where they'd learn about love and work and the satisfaction that came from building something with your own hands. Santos and Billy had prepared for their arrival. The bunkhouse had been cleaned and arranged with 3 small beds, fresh blankets, and wildflowers in a mason jar on the windowsill. There was fresh bread cooling on the kitchen table and a pot of beans simmering on the stove. "Welcome home," Marcus said as they climbed down from the wagon. Anna spoke her first words then, looking up at Elena with wide eyes. "This is really ours?" "Yes, mija," Elena said, kneeling down to Anna's level. "This is really ours. All of it. The house, the land, the animals. But most importantly, we're yours. Forever." The first few weeks were an adjustment for everyone. Maria threw herself into helping Elena with cooking and cleaning, desperate to prove her worth. James followed Marcus and Santos around, absorbing everything they could teach him about ranching. Anna remained quiet, but Elena often found her sitting by the corral, watching the horses with fascination. It was Hope, the filly, who finally broke through Anna's silence. One morning, Elena found the little girl in the barn, sitting cross-legged in the straw while Hope nuzzled her hair. "She likes me," Anna whispered, the first complete sentence she'd spoken since arriving. "Of course she does," Elena said, settling beside her. "Animals know good people. And you're very good people, Anna." "Will she always be mine?" Elena felt her heart break a little at the question, at the desperate need for permanence it revealed. "Yes, sweetheart. Hope will always be yours, just like you'll always be ours." Slowly, carefully, Anna began to open up. She talked to Hope first, then to Elena, sharing bits and pieces of her past, memories of her parents, fears about being sent away, dreams about learning to ride. Elena listened to it all with patient love, never pushing, always available. Maria was different challenge. At 12, she'd learned to be indispensable, to anticipate needs before they were voiced. She worked from dawn to dusk, never complaining, never resting. Elena recognized the pattern, the frantic need to be useful, to be worth keeping. "Maria," Elena said one evening as the girl scrubbed dishes that were already clean, "come sit with me." "I need to finish the kitchen, Mama Elena." Elena's heart caught at the name, but she kept her voice gentle. "The kitchen can wait." "Come." Reluctantly, Maria dried her hands and joined Elena on the porch. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch. "You don't have to earn your place here," Elena said finally. "This is your home, because we love you, not because of what you can do for us." Maria's carefully composed expression cracked. "But what if I'm not good enough? What if you get tired of me and send me back?" "Oh, mija." Elena pulled the girl close. "Look at me. Look." Maria raised tearful eyes. "You are my daughter now, not because you cook or clean or take care of everyone else. You're my daughter because I choose to love you, and that choice isn't dependent on anything you do or don't do." Maria sobbed then, all the fear and responsibility she'd carried for years pouring out in wrenching cries. Elena held her, rocked her, whispered all the loving words she'd never had the chance to say to a daughter before. James was the easiest in some ways. He was hungry for male guidance, for someone to teach him the skills he'd need to become a man. Marcus took him on as a shadow, teaching him to rope and ride, to read the weather and the signs that cattle were sick or straying. The boy absorbed it all eagerly, and Marcus found himself remembering his own childhood, the satisfaction of learning something difficult and doing it well. "Mr. Marcus," James said one evening as they repaired fence together, "how'd you know you wanted to marry Mama Elena?" Marcus paused in his work. "Well, I suppose I knew when I realized I couldn't imagine my life without her in it." "You think I'll find someone like that someday?" "I hope so, son." "But first you need to become the kind of man worth finding." James considered this seriously. "What kind of man is that?" "The kind who keeps his word, who treats people with respect, especially those who are smaller or weaker, who works hard and shares what he has, who loves without trying to own." Marcus looked at the boy directly. "The kind of man who makes the people around him feel safe and valued." "Like you do with Mama Elena?" "I try to." Summer rolled on, brutal and beautiful. The children settled into the rhythm of ranch life, each finding their own place in the family. Maria learned to relax, to laugh, to be 12 years old instead of everyone's caretaker. Anna grew braver, spending hours with Hope and the other horses, developing an almost mystical connection with the animals. James grew taller and more confident, his shoulders broadening from the physical work, and his voice beginning to crack with approaching adolescence. Elena bloomed in her role as mother. She was patient with scraped knees and hurt feelings, firm with chores and expectations, creative with lessons and entertainment. She taught Maria to read better, helped James with arithmetic, and spent long afternoons teaching Anna the names of plants and animals in both English and Spanish. Marcus watched his wife with wonder. She'd taken to motherhood like she'd been born to it, intuitive and loving and somehow always knowing exactly what each child needed. He found himself falling in love with her all over again, seeing new depths to her strength and gentleness. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch after the children had gone to bed, Elena leaned against Marcus's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Tired?" he asked. "Good tired," she replied. "Full tired." "Any regrets about taking on 3 at once?" Elena was quiet for a moment, considering. "Only that we didn't do it sooner." "We needed time to build this first," Marcus said, gesturing toward the ranch. "Time to become strong enough to hold others." "Do you think we're doing right by them?" Marcus looked through the window where he could see James reading by lamplight, Maria brushing Anna's hair with gentle strokes. "I think they're happy." I think they feel safe. I think they know they're loved. They are loved, Elena said fiercely. So much it sometimes scares me. Why? Because I never knew I could love this much. It makes me feel vulnerable, like I have so much to lose now. Marcus understood. Love was always a risk, always an act of faith that the world wouldn't snatch away what you held most dear. But it was a risk worth taking. The loving is worth the fear, he said. I know. I'm just grateful, I suppose, for all of this. For you, for them, for this life we've built. Elena? Yes? I love you. Not just because you're beautiful or good with the children or any other reason. I love you because you're you. Because you make everything better just by being in it. Elena turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I love you too. So much. They kissed there on the porch, surrounded by the sounds of their life. Horses nickering in the corral, cattle lowing in the distance, the soft murmur of voices from inside the house where their children were settling down for the night. Later that evening, after Marcus had checked all the locks and Elena had looked in on each child, they lay in their bed, talking about plans for the fall. Maria would need new dresses as she grew taller. James wanted to learn to break horses properly. Anna had expressed interest in learning to garden. We'll need to think about schooling soon, Elena said. There's talk of hiring a teacher for the county, someone to travel between the ranches. Good. They all need proper education. Maria's pretty far along already. She might be able to help teach the younger ones. Elena smiled in the darkness. She'd like that. She's a born teacher. Like someone else I know. I never taught before this. You teach every day. Just not in a schoolhouse. They talked until late, planning and dreaming and marveling at how completely their lives had changed in just 1 year. From a lonely widower and a desperate runaway to this, a family, a home, a future full of possibility. September brought cooler weather and the first hints of autumn. The children had been with them for a month, and the rough edges of adjustment had smoothed into comfortable routine. Maria had learned to trust that she would be fed and clothed and loved, whether she worked herself to exhaustion or not. James had grown confident in his abilities with horses and cattle, earning praise from Santos and Marcus alike. Anna had begun talking more, sharing stories and jokes and the kind of random observations that only children made. It was during this peaceful time that trouble arrived in the form of a letter delivered by a stern-faced man who introduced himself as Inspector Williams from the Territorial Children's Welfare Office. Mrs. Whitman, he said formally, I need to speak with you about the children you've taken from the San Antonio orphanage. Elena felt her blood go cold. Is there a problem? There's been a complaint. Someone has suggested that you and your husband are not providing adequate care for these children. That's ridiculous, Marcus said, stepping up beside Elena. Who made this complaint? Inspector Williams consulted his papers. I'm not at liberty to say, but I'm required to investigate all reports of child welfare concerns. Elena's mind raced. Who would make such a complaint? They'd been nothing but loving and careful with the children. Unless... Does this have anything to do with Diego Morales? She asked quietly. Williams looked surprised. You know Mr. Morales? He's my former husband. He has issues with my current life. I see. Williams made a note. Well, regardless of the source, I still need to conduct an investigation. I'll need to speak with the children, examine their living conditions, review their health and education. The next few days were tense and difficult. Inspector Williams prowled around the ranch, taking notes, asking probing questions, watching Elena and Marcus interact with the children. The children themselves were confused and frightened by the stranger who seemed to be judging everything they did. Are we in trouble? Anna whispered to Elena one evening. No, mija. You're not in trouble. None of you are. Is the man going to take us back to the orphanage? Elena's heart clenched. I won't let that happen. But privately, she was terrified. Inspector Williams seemed determined to find fault, to prove that a Mexican woman and a rough rancher couldn't possibly provide proper care for 3 orphan children. He questioned their decision to allow the children to work with the animals, their informal approach to education, their bilingual household. It was Maria who finally stood up to him. On the 3rd day of his visit, as he questioned why she was helping Elena prepare dinner instead of studying from books, the 12-year-old girl drew herself up to her full height and faced him squarely. "Sir," she said with dignity beyond her years, "I know you think we're not being cared for properly, but you're wrong. Before I came here, I spent 4 years in that orphanage. I know what it feels like to be unwanted, to be just another mouth to feed. And I know what it feels like to be loved." Inspector Williams looked startled. "Child, I'm just trying to ensure—" "I'm trying to tell you something important," Maria interrupted firmly. "Mama Elena and Papa Marcus don't just feed us and clothe us and give us beds to sleep in. They love us, they listen to us, they make us feel like we matter, like we're worth something. When I have bad dreams, Mama Elena sits with me until I feel safe. When James wants to learn something, Papa Marcus takes time to teach him properly. When Anna was scared of the horses, they both worked with her until she felt brave." The girl's voice grew stronger. "You want to know about our education? Mama Elena is teaching me to read better than I ever could at the orphanage. She's teaching Anna 2 languages. Papa Marcus is teaching James skills that will help him make a living as a man. But more than that, they're teaching all of us that we're worthy of love, that we have value, that we can build good lives for ourselves." Inspector Williams was quiet for a long moment. "And you're happy here?" "Happier than I've ever been in my life." "And your brother and sister?" Maria looked toward James and Anna, who were playing with Hope in the corral. "Look at them. Really, look. Do they look neglected to you? Do they look unloved?" Williams followed her gaze and saw what anyone with eyes could see. 2 children who were secure, content, growing strong in body and spirit. James was patiently teaching Anna to braid a rope, his voice gentle and encouraging. Anna was laughing, a sound that had become more and more frequent as she learned to trust her new world. That evening, Inspector Williams asked to speak privately with Elena and Marcus. They sat in the front room, tension thick in the air. "I want you to know," Williams began, "that in my professional opinion, these children are receiving excellent care. They're healthy, happy, and clearly loved. The complaint against you appears to have been motivated by personal animosity rather than legitimate concern." Elena felt her knees go weak with relief. "However," Williams continued, "there are some areas where improvement could be made. Formal schooling, for instance. The territorial government is requiring all children to receive structured education." "We're prepared to comply with any requirements," Marcus said quickly. "Good. I'll be recommending that you be allowed to keep the children, with the provision that you arrange for formal schooling within 6 months." After Williams left, Elena collapsed onto the porch swing, shaking with reaction. "I thought we were going to lose them." "Never," Marcus said fiercely. "I'd have fought that with everything I had." "Diego isn't going to give up. He'll keep trying to hurt me, hurt us. Then we'll keep fighting him. But Elena, look what we've built here. Look at our family, our life. He can't touch the real stuff, the things that matter." That night, as they tucked the children into bed, Elena held each one a little longer, whispered a few extra words of love. She thought about how close they'd come to losing everything, how fragile happiness could be. But as she lay in Marcus's arms later, listening to the sounds of their sleeping children, she realized something important. Home wasn't just a place. It was the people you loved, the bonds you built, the daily choice to keep loving even when it was hard or scary or dangerous. Diego could send inspectors and make complaints and try to disrupt their lives, but he couldn't unmake their family. He couldn't unlove the children or break the trust they'd built or destroy the foundation of respect and affection that held them all together. Marcus, she whispered in the dark, I'm not afraid anymore. No? No. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. All of us. As a family. Marcus tightened his arms around her. Yes, we will. October brought the first real relief from the summer's heat. The children had been with them for 2 months, and the last traces of their institutional wariness had finally disappeared. They fought like siblings now, laughed like siblings, supported each other through scrapes and disappointments like siblings. Elena and Marcus had become simply Mama and Papa. No qualifications needed. The formal education requirement turned out to be less burdensome than expected. A traveling teacher named Miss Peterson arrived in November, making rounds between the scattered ranches. She was a practical woman who understood that ranch children needed different lessons than town children. She praised Maria's reading skills, worked with James on advanced arithmetic, and patiently helped Anna with her letters. You've done well with them, she told Elena after her first week of lessons. They're bright children who've clearly been encouraged to think for themselves. Winter came gently that year, with crisp mornings and mild afternoons. The children experienced their first Christmas as a family, wide-eyed at the presents Marcus and Elena had managed to gather. New clothes, books, a saddle small enough for Anna to learn on, tools for James, hair ribbons for Maria. But the best gift was intangible, the security of knowing they belonged, that this wasn't temporary, that they were home for good. Spring arrived with a letter that made Elena's heart sing. Sister Mary Catherine wrote to tell them that the orphanage had received a substantial donation in their name, enough to improve conditions for the remaining children, and perhaps expand to take in more orphans. Someone thinks we're doing good work, Marcus said, reading over Elena's shoulder. We are doing good work, Elena replied. The best work there is. That summer, their second as a complete family, brought new challenges and joys. Maria turned 13 and began showing interest in the young men who worked the neighboring ranches. James, now 11, announced his intention to become the best horse trainer in Texas. Anna, 7 now and fearless, declared that she was going to marry Hope the horse and live in the barn forever. Elena and Marcus watched their children grow and change, marveled at how quickly the years were passing, how rich life had become. They added another room to the house, started talking about taking in more orphans, planned for futures that stretched ahead full of possibility. One evening in late August, exactly 2 years after they'd first met, Elena and Marcus sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Anna was teaching Hope to shake hands. Maria was reading to a group of younger children from neighboring ranches, and James was showing off his rope tricks to an appreciative audience. Do you ever think about how different things might have been? Elena asked. If you hadn't needed work? If I hadn't needed help? Marcus considered. Sometimes. But I think we would have found each other anyway. Some things are just meant to be. Elena smiled. I used to think I was cursed. That bad things happened to me because I deserved them somehow. And now? Now I think I was being prepared. All that pain, all that struggle, it was teaching me to recognize real love when I found it, teaching me to be grateful for simple things like kindness and safety and belonging. Marcus reached for her hand. I'm grateful too. For you, for them, for this life we built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. Mostly stubbornness, Elena laughed, the best kind. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Elena felt the deep contentment that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The girl who had run through the winter night with nothing but fear and determination had become a woman with roots deep as bedrock, with love that flowed like water to nourish everything around her. She was Elena Whitman now, wife and mother, rancher and dreamer, a woman who had learned that the best revenge against cruelty was building something beautiful, something lasting, something full of the love she'd been denied for so long. The heat of the day was fading, and the evening breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and horse sweat and the indefinable smell of home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new chances to prove that love was stronger than fear, that families could be chosen as well as born, that sometimes the most broken people could build the most beautiful lives. But tonight, Elena was content to sit beside her husband, watching their children laugh and play in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the land that had witnessed their transformation from strangers to family, from survivors to thrivers, from people running from the past to people building toward the future. The summer heat had brought them together, but love had made them stay.